Hi, everyone. Welcome to our GDC panel. I am so excited for what you're going to see today. My name is Nika Noor. I'm the Executive Director of the International Game Developers Association Foundation. We exclusively work on increasing representation and diversifying the video game workforce. We really believe in making sure that every person who wants to make or play games deserves a chance to do so. And today we're going to focus on a really special topic. We're going to be talking about building pipelines to find, grow, and retain diverse talent. But enough of that. Let's get to our stellar panelists. Let's do a round of introductions, starting with Movell.
Hi, I'm Movell, and that's my dog Poppy that you can hear in the background. She's barking outside. So I joined Unity in October of last year, so I haven't actually stepped foot in the Unity office yet because of the pandemic. I work on the inclusion team. I head up inclusion for Unity. We have a small team there. We focus on lots of different things, which we'll talk about later, but I'm really enjoying working. There's a difference for me because I haven't come from tech. But inclusion is inclusion wherever you are. There are nuances depending on the different industries, but inclusion is primarily about people. So it's about people at Unity as well. I'm loving it. That's me.
Awesome. Davina, how about you?
Hey everyone, I'm Davina Mackey. I am the Director of Support Services and Operations for PlayStation Studios QA. I've been at SIE, Sony Interactive Entertainment, for over 16 years. Started from the grassroots, and I've basically worked my way up. I'm also the president of Black at PlayStation, which is one of 7 affinity groups at SIE, and I've been president for 5 years. So I'm enjoying, my space, doing DE&I work and supporting underrepresented communities, and we're really doing some interesting work now at SIE. And my whole thing is, if we can make an impact and make representation of underrepresented people, Black people specifically in my realm, we can improve the representation in tech or in the video game industry. That's where I'm focused.
Awesome. Trinidad, how you doing?
Hi, everybody. Trinidad here. I'm the head of diversity and inclusion at Niantic. I'm passionate about people. I'm passionate about policy, and I'm passionate about impact. And so my mantra in life is stay ready, don't have to get ready. So I'm always ready, and I'm always ready to educate, empower, and utilize my genius to help people understand why all of this that we're about to talk about is imperative, not only to the business, but just to us being better humans.
That's awesome. Well, let's dig into it. Let's see how we're actually developing the actions and pipelines behind these great thoughts. Davina, do you mind sharing some of the initiatives you're working on at your company?
Yeah, so we've had a very impactful year, I should say, and I would say prior to the pandemic, we were stuck in culture awareness. We really didn't have strategy. We have a new leader in DE&I. Her name is Tiffany Hester. She's an amazing individual that introduced strategy in the ENET space, is what we call it at SIE. And so that happened. So we had new D&I leadership, and we also had the John Platt, who is the CEO and president of Sony ATV, which is our music licensing division. He had the guts to go to our Sony leadership and ask them to support social justice for underrepresented communities, specifically the Black community. And they allowed for him to put together $100 million donation. that Sony specifically is supporting social justice initiatives. And each division within Sony was able to partake in that $100 million. So each of us got a piece. So PlayStation received, a pot, and we split it with our UK counterparts. So there's a portion going to the US and a portion going to the UK. And from that, we've built relationships with several organizations that promote social justice initiatives. I can only tell you the few that have been announced so far. So, for example, Gameheads, which is in the Bay Area, we're supporting them. Black in Gaming, which is a part of the IGDA-Foundation, Black Girls Code, and Hidden Genius Project, which is for men. So $1 million was donated to them from SIE, specifically those 4 organizations. There are 3 other organizations that we're working with. One I can announce, which is the Black Collegiate Game Association. And that organization has a network of 16 HBCU universities, or historically Black colleges and universities, right? And we're doing all sorts of great programming with them. They have a scholarship that falls under our PlayStation Career Pathways, which is what we've developed based on the social justice initiatives that we're doing. And so BCGA has a scholarship program where they support students that are upperclassmen with hardships and finances. And so we're working to make sure that our Black students are able to actually graduate. We were told that some of them will drop out of school for as little as $2,500, $5,000. And so if PlayStation can support those students in making sure that they complete their education, to me, that's we're going towards the right direction. The next part for us is internships, because we want to improve the channels that we're reaching in talent acquisition. And so we're working with several organizations to build programs that will allow us to bring in students from HBCUs specifically. We've never, like SIE has never tapped into HBCUs as a TA channel for resources or recruits. And so now we have the opportunity to bridge that gap, bring in new talent from HBCUs, and hopefully land them a position and career in the video game industry, specifically at PlayStation.
That's awesome. I love that level of investment. Wow. If you told me 3 years ago today that this was the future, I wouldn't have believed you. So I love it. I love where I can say this. Maybe you can't say it, but I love it when companies put their money where their mouth is. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Trinidad, I know you have been working relentlessly, tirelessly, sleeplessly on driving impact at Niantic. You do so many things. Mind shedding some light with our audience on maybe your current role and your current initiatives?
I'll piggyback off Davina on the Gameheads tip, because we also are supportive of Gameheads, and we just launched a certificate class with Cal State USMB, Cal State East Bay. Not USMB, Cal State East Bay, and in partnership with Unity and Oculus. And it's a certificate program around, Unity, VR, and AR. And so it's just the beginning, and we're excited because the long-term goal is to find ways to infiltrate colleges, HBCUs, local communities that don't have access to possible this AR, VR gaming space, even just the tech that's going out, like finding ways to get people just a taste for it, a desire for it, getting it in front of them. And so the beauty of Gameheads is that they have a program where they can teach youth and young adults from a thought inception all the way to getting it on a platform on how to navigate this game industry. They have something that actually works, right? A lot of their students are at USC. A lot of their students are interning at some of our companies and working with us. And so how do we get that in front of HBCUs? How do we get that in the South, in the Carolinas? How do we get that in Detroit? And so these are ideas and a vision that we have. So this is the first step number one. We also last year, we hosted a program called the Treehouse Apprenticeship Program, where we are creating an unconventional pipeline of boot camp talent. And Treehouse has pivoted. So now we are pivoting to find a new partner to continue this program, because last year was successful. We hired 7 people from this unconventional background, never worked in tech before, in QA and in UX. I mentioned earlier, I like changing policy. It's not sexy. It's not something that on a GDC panel, people are going to be like, ooh, that's so cool. But we are actually changing how we track our marginalized ethnicities and genders. That there is a broken system of the EEOC that the US requires. And it's broken because 2 or more races could be white and Asian. And in tech, white and Asian is a majority. So like that's even misrepresenting data. And so for me, I want the data to be as pure as possible, because then we can make the right decisions based on the communities that we have within our company. I also believe that we're looking at salaries, reassessing where people are to make sure that there's no pay disparities. These are things that, like, again, not sexy, but matter, right? And so I like to do a combination of both low-hanging fruit and high-hanging fruit. I like them to both, because low-hanging fruit is fast, easy. We get short wins. People are excited. They go, woohoo. And then the high-hanging fruit, which takes like 3 to 5 years, it's like, oh, are we done yet? But no, but we have these small wins. And so I do think that there's a lot around our Black Developer Initiative that's hot, it's new, but it's also not easy. Let's talk about it. At Niantic, we are an AR platform company. We focus on augmented reality. We focus on mobile games, but we really want to be the platform of the future for augmented reality. How many Black augmented reality developers do y'all know? I'm pretty sure it's like the 2% of the 2%, but they're out there. And so we're really trying to get awareness around the fact that we want to empower, but building a program to be equitable in a space that has for years been unequitable is one where it's taken us time. We made the commitment in June of last year, and it took us 6 months just to really make sure and form this development program to make sure that we're proud of it. And so we launched it in February this year. We're on to our second cohort right now. We just announced who our second cohort is, and we're recruiting for our next cohort. So these are little things that we're doing, but at the end of the day, we're just scratching the surface. We're not going to reverse 300 years of systemic racism overnight. Actually 400 years. So how do we go about making sure that not only our leaders are accountable and committed, making sure that we're still engaging our communities and our partnerships externally and in our backyard, but then also building a culture of inclusion where people can bring their genius to work. So these are all things that are toiling into my mind every day as I wake up. I'm not a coder, and no offense to y'all coders, but like, I can't just close the laptop and stop thinking about this. This is a long-term thing that I hope I get to see some in my lifetime, but I'm not banking on it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Trinidad. And thank you for thinking about this even after 5. I think that's the tenacity that's important to keep the spirit going. Now, Mavel, people talk about diversity initiatives and kind of refer to them, especially in bigger companies, almost as if they're US-centric structures. But that's not true, because you're dealing with a whole other region of the world in a company that's doing it across multiple continents. talk to us a little bit about your experiences and what you're working on over at Unity.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we have pretty much the same kind of issues in the UK and in the EMEA region, which is obviously Europe, Middle East and Africa. But I focus predominantly on the kind of European side of things. So UK, France, Germany, Finland, places like that we have offices. But it's a tricky situation trying to deal with inclusion and diversity in Europe, because a lot of the legislation prevents people from even measuring diversity and inclusion. In some countries in Europe, it's actually illegal to gather data about people's ethnicity, for instance, or whether their sexual orientation. So it becomes really difficult to gauge where you should focus, right? Because we know that what gets measured gets done, and if you can't measure something, it's really hard to kind of figure out where you should be focused. However, what we've decided to do at Unity is to kind of focus on where we can focus. So we're able to gather data in the EMEA region on gender. We're not able to gather any information on ethnicity, but we're able to gather that data on gender. So we focus our efforts primarily on gender, but that doesn't mean we don't focus on other areas. We just can't do it in a very, shall I say, in your face or explicit kind of way, because we can get ourselves into trouble for doing that. But we do realize that there is still issues within countries in Europe as it pertains to ethnicity and other, what we call in the UK, protected characteristics, which are, things like LGBT status, religion, socioeconomic status. So there's all those things that we do focus on. We just can't necessarily measure them. So some of the things that we're doing in Unity on a global level is looking at, and Trinidad mentioned it before, is looking at our data. So we're taking a very data-based approach to pay equity, recruiting, retention, and promotion at all levels, because we recognize that these are things that we can control because we have our own data, right? So that's one of the things we're focusing on. We're also looking at introducing targets. They include hiring retention targets to increase representation of women across all Unity offices. So that's across APAC, EMEA, and the US. And also looking at increasing that representation at Black and Latinx level in the US. And then some of the other things we're looking at is making sure that all of our leadership are able to kind of deal with some of these issues, right? Because a lot of the times, leadership want to be helpful, but they don't necessarily understand the issues. So we've just spent the last 6 months embarked on a leadership training course where we brought in an external provider to look at how leaders at director level and above can understand race and inclusion in the workplace. And we're kind of making sure that we're embedding those practices. We've just finished the training. So we're now completing plans for each leader to have targets on how they're going to embed their learning. And then, of course, we're doing things, some of the similar things that Vina and Trinidad have been doing. So we're partnering with, I think, nearly 24 community organizations and nonprofits. Some of those, most of those are in the US, but we've just recently started partnering with some in the UK. So we've got the Black Tech Sales Network here. And then we're also partnering with people like Novate Black, Blacks in Gaming, Queer Tech, all the others, the standard ones that you would see across the US. And then we're also doing a number of recruiting initiatives. We attend 5 major recruiting conferences per year. And then we do specific targeted recruiting exercises with each of the directors. So where they want to increase their representation, we actually sit and focus our attentions on how they can do that. So we're recruiting specifically for underrepresentation and making sure we're increasing that within our leadership. So we're doing a number of things and we're trying to make sure that approach is consistent from US to APAC to EMEA. But as I said, it's slightly challenging sometimes when we can't kind of gather that data. But we're still making sure we're focusing on those things because the issues are the same wherever they are. I said at the beginning that my background isn't in tech. My background's in inclusion. I've been doing this work for 20 years, and the issues are the same from industry to industry. So we're just making sure that we're focusing on people and trying to do what we can to improve the experience of everybody that works within Unity.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Look, because we have such an incredible panel here, I would like to pivot to an important topic. We talk about targeting, recruitment, data, making sure that we've got, this representation there and that they are well served from, an earlier point of someone's career. We've all been there. We were all bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, let's go get it done, rah, rah, rule the world. And sometimes the world kicks us in the back of our knees. And this industry is quite relentless, not even just to marginalized folks, but it can be quite unforgiving and relentless. The average turnover rate of a gaming professional, according to the IGDA Developer Satisfaction Survey, is 2 to 5 years. And at least from the IGDA-Foundation side, every year we award and support 100 different types of scholarships and recipients that we walk through. And time again, especially people who've been in the industry for a while, we are seeing underrepresented talent face severe imposter syndrome, feelings that they don't belong, that they weren't meant to be leaders, that they can't be promoted, or that they shouldn't shoot for the moon and become a vice president, etc. Ladies, how do we tackle retention, not just at the company level, but on an industry level? How do we keep these awesome people that we are investing time, money, research into this industry? Because it is such a shame. It is such a shame to see diverse talent leave. Trinidad, why don't you kick us off?
It starts with a people first mentality within management. And I like to call managers the frozen chosen. They're hit from both sides. They're hit from executive leaders, giving them direction, objectives, and then you have individual contributors who you manage who have their concerns, and depending on the company and how they communicate and how transparent they are, you're stuck. You're stuck in the middle. I do think that a lot of companies need to invest more time, more education, more empowerment to their managers, educating them on how to be an inclusive leader, how to inclusive hire, also empowering them with opportunities for stretch goals to show their leadership skills and be developed. Another thing I would say is it starts at the executive leadership level. If you really do believe in this DEI journey or DEIB journey, DEIEB, we can add acronyms to that as well. You have to show it at your leadership level. Your board, your executive leaders. Do they look like the communities that you're trying to attract? And if they don't, that's a hard miss, in my opinion. Leadership is not something leadership in gaming, we're so particular. Oh, you need 20 plus years of experience. We have a Movell on our call who didn't come from the game industry. I didn't come from the game industry. I'm a leader. Movell's a leader. And I truly believe that at the executive level, all you need to do is give them a little boot camp, have them meet some industry professionals and pillars within the industry, and they too can be an industry professional and leader. And I think that's just a nuance. It's something that we want to do just because we can. And I think it's a blocker. I also believe that we have to start looking at the way that we recruit. I also think that we're sort of happy with only certain schools. We recruit, there's a lot of opportunity here. And if these companies really want to put their money where their mouth is, which all of them seem like they're doing, we need to start pouring into some of these colleges that are less represented in this space and offer them opportunities to create a program, create a school pipeline, also empowering more programs like Game Heads, partnering. We say that we all partner with Black in gaming and Latinx in gaming and gay gaming professionals. How are we keeping the companies that partner with these organizations accountable to actually hiring the talent from these organizations? Because we can run all these career fairs, and they're a waste of most people's time if you don't have recs in hand and you're not willing to interview people on the spot, or at least get some type of schedule where you're like, boom, we're committed to interviewing, to this, getting to the second round, blah, 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 you know? And so I just truly believe that there's a lot of performative stuff happening in our industry. I do believe we have some great DEI leaders. We have some great DEI practitioners. Davina, great DEI affinity group leaders, like, have been in this space for so long. And it's unfortunate that only the resilient last. And the thing is that should not be the case, you know, and that's the problem, right? People ask me, how has your last couple of years been? I was like, yo, I feel like I've been in a boot camp. I've been in the game industry only 3 years and it feels like 15, you know, and Davina, God bless you. You know, I'm not sure how long you've been, you know, able to endure. And like, obviously Sony's taking care of you, right? Like, so if you find a good place, then you could flower and foster and grow. More power to you. But what do we do about those bad managers? Because people leave these managers, not necessarily these companies. I think all of the companies that are on these panels are dope. But I don't think all of our managers are prepared to manage people who don't look like them or may not represent what they represent. So why are we not focusing on our management styles and how we empower our culture? And we're focused more on a pipeline. You know, your pipeline is trash if the manager, the person who is coming in through the pipeline, doesn't understand how to work with them, empower them, see them, give feedback. Announcement. Feedback is not a dirty word. And guess what? Anybody who's listening to this, if you are a manager and you manage a Black, brown, marginalized gender or an ethnicity person, you better give them feedback. Because if you don't, you're telling me that you really don't care about their growth and empowerment at your company, period. That's a systemic crack. White and Asian people don't like giving Black people feedback. Are you scared? You think we're going to yell at you? Come on. You give your buddy a feedback at the bar with a beer. Like, give me the same due diligence and give me feedback. That tells me, and yes, I might not like your feedback. So, oh, well, my best professors in college ran me into the ground with feedback. And I was just like, at a young age, I didn't understand. I was like, ugh, I just hate this professor. But that's the class that I learned the most from. My old bosses, who one was a Jamaican woman, God bless her soul, you know who you are. Like, she would just run me like, you need to, you know, she was a chief diversity officer. That was my boot camp. She cared about me enough to tell me, Trin, if you don't change your ways here, you're not going to make it. And look where I'm at today. Because she gave me feedback. And I'm telling you right now, I've had more bosses than none give me like no feedback whatsoever. They're, oh, you're doing great. And then you realize, I mean, I'm still here. You haven't fired me, but I need to grow. I need to develop. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. I know I'm not doing everything perfectly. So I'll pause there, because I think that those are things that companies overlook because they just want to focus on a pipeline, but not focus on the rotten apple that is rotting and creating a stench. And you're like, why does nobody want to work for this manager? Or why does nobody want to work in this organization? I mean, if I take a magnifying glass, I could probably figure it out.
Incredible. Davina, from trash pipelines to feedback, I know you've been at PlayStation for quite a long time. You are one of those early, I don't know, maybe not that early, maybe Trinidad's right. You know, we're living in dog years. You know, what do you think here? Are you just resilient? What?
I would say I'm an outlier. I used to call myself a pink unicorn. I'm now a white unicorn because PlayStation has like 5 Black directors, 2 of which that are senior directors, right? So specifically at Black at PlayStation and SIE in general, they are making changes. And our leader, I love our leader, Jim Ryan, he has come in and he has made some instrumental impacts that has allowed us to do a lot in DE&I. First, he understood the need for DE&I, and he brought a very strategic and seasoned individual with Tiffany Hester. And what we've been able to do, and he's also changed HR. So now we have Orit, who is very instrumental and knowledgeable about, just the talent that we bring in. So Trinidad, you mentioned so many key things. One of the first things that PlayStation has done is they've changed their performance management tool and framework, and it includes cultural leadership values. And within cultural leadership values, which now is not just about what you do and your goals that you accomplish, it's about how you do it. But within that is embedded DE&I. And so we specifically can carve goals out within DE&I space. So I can talk about being the Black at PlayStation president within my goals, and my manager is now understanding that because it's a part of the goals for SIE, and he is going to rate me on doing that job. So hands down, that has been a big change in making sure that, how we execute, how we treat our employees who are underserved, all of the things that is needed is there. DE&I has been an impact as well, because what we understood is there is a gatekeeper, there is filtering in talent acquisition. We all know this. And Morvell, you mentioned data, and Trinidad, you also mentioned this as well. We have all sorts of data in the gaming industry about women, so gender is there. We know, we know demographics on other areas, but you really don't see much in race, or they don't allow us to make it public, right? And so, I did a presentation that showed that, nationwide, the Black representation in the US is about between 5 and 7%, Black representation in tech. When you come to Silicon Valley, though, that decreases down to 2.5%, right? So that's like half of the, representation in nationwide. But when you go to the universities, you'll see like Stanford, if you look at the engineering program there, they're about 5% Black representation. So there's this misnomer that, there's not enough Black talent, for example, in the pipeline, but that's not true. There are gatekeepers, these managers that Trinidad has talked about that have unconscious bias. And, I think that's a new fancy word. Let's just say what it is prejudice, right? And the companies are not doing a great job at providing training and holding them accountable for being prejudiced, point blank. And they're keeping talent out of the pipeline, period. Or if we do get into the pipeline, I say that I am an outlier because I came from the grassroots. I was a project coordinator when I started at Sony, at SIE. And because I had great managers like Dave Morant, shout out to him, and he allowed for me to grow, I also took accountability for my career and was able to level up. And, they also paid for my education. So I didn't have my undergrad when I started, and Sony paid for it. And then I went back for my master's degree. Sony paid for that. And I promoted each time. So I'm an outlier. So I won't say that there are many like me. However, I think that there are programs that we're putting together within DE&I space that is allowing us to do a couple of extra things, because I believe we, as an underrepresented community, have to take responsibility as well. So we are looking at providing awareness that there are opportunities in the video game industry, starting in middle school, because if you tap into middle school kids and let them know that talents that they have in computer science skills or even the arts, so music and, visual arts like, creative drawing and all those type of skills that they can get can translate into a career in the video game industry. So we're under the PlayStation Career Pathways. We are working with those nonprofit organizations through the Social Justice Initiative to build programming that starts at the middle school level and ensure that we can create pipelines that start there. So we're working with schools, we're working with the universities, and then, creating programs within Sony that allow for that talent to come in. Specifically, HBCUs is our target as well. So creating the pathways, creating the internships. So Sony's internship is a challenge. Like if you're not at a certain school, it's pretty much challenging to get in. So we're creating a separate internship program that allows for talent within the HBCUs to pipe in. And those internships are not one set season. They basically start as a freshman and then come back as a sophomore, and then they come back as a junior and come back as a senior, and they end up with some sort of apprenticeship opportunity and an actual career at PlayStation. That to me is impacting the pipeline. I think the place where we've not targeted yet, but I think DE&I, Tiffany or Reed are handling this, is the unconscious bias that we face, making sure that those gatekeepers, we break that down as well. And we've asked for data. We want to know things like how many Black managers are there? How many have been promoted? How many are being paid equitably, with their peers? We want to understand when there is a rift, how many Black employees are impacted, and what is the offboarding, right? We want to know these things because we know if we understand the metrics, then we can bridge the gaps. And if you don't have the metrics like Movell says, then you really don't have a justification to base what you're doing off of. So, I said a lot, but I just think that if, 2.7% in tech, Black representation is bad. And it needs to increase. And if you go into the game industry, I think it's less than 1% from a survey that IGDA created, based off of GDC attendance, right? We have to do better than that. So when you look at, underrepresented communities play games. They hold large markets that need to be tapped into. And if they're playing your games, why not make sure that the people have opportunities to see themselves represented in games correctly, that people are making the games represent them, right? I think that it would bring more revenue to our game companies, and they just don't realize that yet.
Yeah. Movell, how does Unity tackle retention? I know that y'all focus on what you can focus on. So how do you focus on retaining talent?
So, all of the things that both Trinidad and Davina have said apply to everyone at Unity also. And I think the biggest issue is with the gatekeepers and identifying talent, right? Because even when we get people in from underrepresented groups, it's classic, and this is not just in tech or in gaming. You get people through the door and then you don't recognize them as talent, so they don't progress. Right. And then that's what happens in terms of your retention rates. They slip because if I'm not progressing and I'm not seen as talent, why would I stick around? Right. So people leave. So what we're focusing on at Unity at the moment, and I'm personally working on this, is building a sponsorship program for our underrepresented groups. And what we're going to have is our senior leaders, our senior most leaders, be responsible for sponsoring an individual from an underrepresented group who decides to nominate themselves, because we're not going to have the gatekeepers nominate who talent is and who can then have a senior leader sponsor, because then we're just going to perpetuate the same old, right? So you're going to decide that you're talent and you're going to represent yourself and say, look, I'm going to nominate myself for this program. And then you will the program is going to run for about a year. So you'll spend a year being sponsored by some of our most senior people within the organization. And we've chosen to focus on sponsorship rather than mentoring, because mentoring only takes you so far. Sponsorship allows the senior person to advocate for that talent when they're not in the room. And that's not to say they're going to say to somebody, give that person a job because they're my sponsee. It's about saying, hey, you should talk to Trinidad. She's really talented. Because we know that when these discussions about who's talented take place, it's very rare that somebody who's from an underrepresented group is even mentioned. And that's because the gatekeepers have not put them forward as talent. They've not been given some of those career-defining opportunities that would allow them to stand out. So we have to be explicit about how we manage that. And that's why we've decided to create a sponsorship program. So these people will then have that one-to-one key into leadership. They'll get to see how the business itself operates. They'll get to, mix and mingle with people who are outside of their management chain so that they can then see, for themselves what it's like outside of their management chain, but also those people are exposed to them. And what we hope will happen there is that once we've got one cohort through this process and people can see that talent does not just look like one thing, we're hoping then that people start saying, oh, okay, actually, there were some really good people came through that sponsorship program last time. Let's have a look at talent in a different way. We really want people to start re-examining what talent looks like, because if we don't, we're not going to retain people. Because ultimately, no one's going to stay somewhere they're not growing. And I love what Trinidad was saying about feedback, because, again, outside of tech, in tech, people are afraid to give people of color feedback. And I don't understand why that is. I have a teenage daughter, and I used to tell her, if your teachers are not complaining about your bad behavior, if you behave badly, it means they don't care. They actually do not care. If they're talking to me about your behavior, that says to me they recognize you as talent and they want you to do better. And it's the same in the workplace. And all of that generic feedback, you're doing great, means nothing. It's the smokescreen for not telling you what you really think. Because at the end of the day, they're going to be high performers who are from underrepresented groups, and they're going to be low performers. But in order for people to progress, they need to know that they're a low performer so they can improve, right? And that's part of how you retain people. You give them that constructive feedback that is not always favorable, but they're able to understand, this is where I need to grow. So we're really focusing in on that aspect of things. So we're taking the top-down and the bottom-up approach. But then also the training I mentioned before for our senior leaders and directors and above, we're expecting them to take what they learned and start helping that trickle down into the management chains. And that's why we're going to be working with them on an implementation plan as to how they then take some of that knowledge that they acquired and pass it on to the gatekeepers so that they can actually start fixing some of those issues that occur where we've got some of those bad managers who have unconscious bias or just, racist tendencies or sexist tendencies. Because if, what we start doing is focusing on those people and giving them the tools to do better. When they don't, you then have the reason and the rationale for saying, it's time for you to leave this company. So that's where we're focused at the moment.
Fantastic. And thanks so much for that. Do you mind, Movelle, actually kicking us off with our last question as we wrap here? I'd love for every panelist, starting with Movelle, to kick us off with what piece of advice do you have for the next generation of talent, for the many yous who are watching this and going, I want to be them, I want to do that. What are we telling folks these days? At least, what would you tell them?
I will tell people what I tell my daughter, which is, you can do anything you want to do, but there's going to be people who try to obstruct you. And so for me, it's not about trying to get a seat at the table if no one wants you to be there. You make your own damn table, or you burst the doors down and tell people, actually, I'm talented. But it starts with you believing in yourself. And so it goes back to that same feedback conversation. I want to tell teachers to give feedback to students. If they're not doing the things they should be doing, tell them. If they're talented, recognize that and actually showcase that and put it where it belongs. All too often, children who are talented from underrepresented groups at schools don't get told they're talented, or we hide their talent, or we have them help other kids out in the classroom, as opposed to saying, let's create a gifted and talented program where we can focus on these kids and get them to shine and move them through processes sooner if they're ready for it. So it starts at that stage. So I would tell teachers to identify talent and actually focus on it and give feedback where someone isn't performing to the best abilities. And then talk to those individuals and tell them, hear what people are saying to you. Don't shy away from feedback and criticism. Ask for it. If it's not being given to you, ask for it. Because deep down, if you're not doing a good job, right? And so sometimes we sit back and we want to be told, yeah, you're doing an okay job, and we accept that. And then we complain that actually we're not progressing. But if you know you're not doing a good job, ask for that feedback, and ask for very specific feedback also. So people will say, you're doing fine. Okay, well, what does that mean? How am I doing fine? And if I'm doing fine, how can I improve? When I used to go with my daughter to her parents' evenings, is what we call them here, where you had a chance to speak to teachers, they would always say, she's doing great. And I would have a little pen and paper and say, okay, great. How can she improve on that? Great. What else can she be doing? And I expect people to be asking those questions for themselves. We have to take responsibility for our own development, especially if people don't want to help us with that. So that's what I would tell people, is take your development seriously, advocate for yourself. It's not always easy, but if it's not easy for you, get yourself a mentor, get yourself a sponsor, get someone to speak for you, because that's important also. And it's fine that at Unity we're creating that program, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with individuals going and speaking to a senior person and saying, I like the way you work. Trinidad, I love how you speak. I love what you stand for. Would you mind mentoring me? So, don't sit back and wait to be told what to do. Take your career into your own hands. That's what I would tell people.
Fantastic. Thank you. Davina, piece of advice.
I would say take accountability for your career first. And if you want to get into the game industry, make sure you're doing things like participating with GDC, going to E3 and understanding the various organizations that are in the industry, the various publishers and game developers, right? Make sure that your college experience is specific to the discipline that you want to get it within, because it's going to give you a higher success rate in getting a job. Make sure you get an intern and get a mentor as sooner than later, right? If you have a mentor in your college years and you have people that can sponsor you, I think that also levels the playing field for you. Make sure you take negotiation skills, because there's nothing wrong. I know one of the underrepresented, one of the things we do that we can improve most is we don't negotiate well enough our salaries when we're coming on board to these companies. So take negotiation skills and don't be afraid to understand what your value is and ask for it, because you really only have that one chance, right? And then the other thing is, once you get into the company, understand from an HR perspective what training opportunities you have, and make sure you always level up your skills by making sure you keep abreast of the training that's there and keep your skills sharpened. And then you need to ask your managers for one-to-ones on a consistent basis and understand what the expectations are, for your specific job. And if you're touching base on a cadence, that means that you shouldn't be surprised at the end of the day when you end up with your performance appraisal. And then you also should be doing your individual development plan, so that in 3 to 5 years, the trajectory of your career, where you want to go. And then get those networks, because don't only rely on the people that you know at your current job. Black in Gaming is a great network of people from various publishers and development houses, where if you get to know these individuals, you have opportunities elsewhere. The networks are great. So that is my advice. I know that's a lot to chew, but it's a lot of work. This is not easy, guys. If you really want to get into this industry, it's fun, it's rewarding. I think, I can't complain. For 16 plus years, I've been able to do various things and have a ball. And, people in my family regard what I do highly, like I'm some big shot. I even got asked for my autograph at the airport because I had my badge on, and I thought that was insane. But so there are perks to being at some of these companies, and it's enjoyable work. So now, that's my advice. And then just have fun and make sure that you're just, you're not working just for a paycheck, but you have substance and it's building, you personally, but also have work-life balance. And that's all I'm going to say.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. Trinidad, mind closing us out with your last thoughts and piece of advice?
Sure. So my advice is very simple. I think number one is network. And I think this is something that everybody has said on the panel is network, 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 network. We could put our names out there. We can say that we're in this industry and that we're here to help, but I can count on my hand how many people actually take that opportunity and reach out and actually try to network. Black in gaming is there. Latinx in gaming, gay gaming professionals, game devs of color, IGDA, IGDAF, there's just there's so much that you could essentially just tap into and say like, hey, I'm interested. I don't know where to start. You could start at any of those places. And it takes being vulnerable and stepping out and saying, hey, I don't know everything, but I'm interested. I've never been hit with resistance in this industry. You may not get a response right away. You may not even get a response, but you will get one. And so for me, I think that's something that's overlooked. And yes, if you're an introvert, I understand there are ways that you can write a great email that catches someone's attention. There are ways that you could send a LinkedIn message, that is captivating. Use your genius, use your gifts. And then also, once you network, offer them something. Is there anything I can do to help? Is there a volunteer opportunity? Is there, I find that sometimes it's even hard for me to be like, that's a good question. And that makes me want to come back with like, all right, here you go. Here's an opportunity. Here's an idea. I want you to do this. And so another thing is, when anybody meets with me for like an introductory or one-on-one, I give them assignments and I'll see how serious you are if you actually come back with the assignments. And those assignments are not for me. Those assignments are for you. So understanding exactly, like taking the time to maybe not have it correct in the sense of like, what the future holds, but actually like be like, hey, I have some ideas. I don't know what my future could hold, but I'm really interested and I just want to get in the industry. Like, where do I start? Having those conversations and then being open to feedback. Because one thing I know is, at least on this panel, we all give feedback and we all give feedback because we care. And I can't say that I've, this generation behind me, I want to work for some of y'all. Y'all are so smart. But it's also like, if I'm coming to you with feedback, listen, I'm not hating. I'm not hating on you. I want you to succeed. I want you to make it in this space. And it takes the Davinas, the Movels, the Nikas who've been here longer, who can come in and give you that feedback in a way that, because they understand the scope and they understand the journey. So I think those two things are being able to network, being able to tap into the resources that are already out there. I'm pretty sure you can rerun this and you can listen and you can hear these things and you can Google search all of those things that we mentioned, Gameheads, Black in Gaming, all these organizations. In the UK, there's Code Coven. There's a bunch of, organizations out there. So how do we tap in? You have to do your work. And then if at the end of the day, you're like, dang it, I forgot everything that was just said. Hit up Nika, hit up Davina, hit up Hovel, hit up myself and be like, hey, I'm really interested, but I just don't know where to start. Go for it.
Awesome. Well, thank you to everyone. And thank you to our lovely panelists. Special thanks to GDC for creating the space for us to have these collaborative discussions. I really, really support Davina, Trinidad, and Movell. Look them up on LinkedIn and Twitter. They're doing some of the most important work out there in the industry today. They are building out the future for folks, for your studios, for your talent. And sincerely, what an incredible discussion. What a powerhouse of women leading the way. I cannot wait to see what everyone does next.
you.